Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hey everyone, Carrie here, and today we're going to take a look at something I got in the mail recently, the Alpha Strike Open Independent Mission Deck. If you want to know how you can get your hands on one of these decks, stay until the end because I have one to give away to a lucky listener. You may be wondering, what the hell am I talking about today? And if you haven't been keeping up with the tournament scene, I can totally understand. The Alpha Strike Open Independent Mission Deck is something we haven't seen, or at least something I haven't seen, before this. And I think the idea is pretty awesome. I did talk with the creators of the deck and asked a couple questions of the Michigan GT team about it. So the first thing I asked is, I'm curious if you wrote and designed the cards, or are these something I just haven't been clued into on the community yet? And Bill, the person who is handling the Michigan GT, the Alpha Strike Open for it, he's the primary person I spoke to. And his response was, yes, we wrote and designed the cards. We've been running events this year in Michigan using the basic format, refining it a bit as we went. My next question was, why did you decide to go with the cards? And his answer was, for the first event, I found print yourself cards, and did it as a lark. Everyone found them hugely useful, so for the Michigan GT I decided to get them professionally printed. Basically, wanted to allow for a variety of missions, deployments, and the like. Between the primary and the deployment zones, there are 30 combinations, and letting players pick their own special secondaries gives you a truly silly number of variations, while still keeping it relatively simple so players can pick it up quickly. I of course asked, was there any inspiration from a particular source like 40K? I know they use a card system for objectives. And Spec, someone else who was in the chat, answered, Alpha Strike Open pretty heavily draws from the old ITC system that predates the current official 40K system with cards. The cards for this format are just an easy reference tool and not required to play the format. You could easily just use the PDF to play and it would make no difference versus the cards that Bill has made. The current 40K system, by contrast, uses its cards to draw random scenarios throughout the game. Bill added, and yeah, late 20-teens ITC missions for 40K would be the biggest starting point. The whole kill one, kill more, hold one, hold more, and player pick potentially asymmetrical secondaries came from there. Okay, so we have the basic gist of what these are, and I want to go over both the cards themselves as well as the rule set that they'll be used with in the tournament. First of all, let's look at the deck and the categories. Then we can hop into each one and go from there. We have a deck of 36 cards here. In the deck, we have 5 deployment cards, 6 primary mission cards, 9 secondary mission cards, 6 rules cards, and a card with QR codes for their Discord and the Alpha Strike Open rules pack. Before I hop into this, I do want to say that the cards are intended for a 4-foot by 4-foot playing area, or 122 by 122 centimeters for those of us who use the metric system. I myself am not included, but hey, I figured it'd be nice to do that. And each game lasts a total of 5 turns. We have the deployment cards. These each have a different deployment method on them. First, there is meeting engagement, which has each player using an opposing 4-inch deployment zone. I like this one because that 4-inch zone makes first turn center objective hopping just a little bit more difficult than it can be with a larger deployment area. Deployment type 2 is the recon enforced deployment. This one's a bit interesting as it considers the table middle to be the diagonal from 2 corners, with each having an opposite opposing corner deployment zone that extends 4 inches deep and 24 inches long along coming out from that home corner. It adds a little bit of flexibility in where and how units can be deployed for the round in relation to board objectives. Deployment Type 3 is similar with a home corner deployment zone in opposite corners. This one is smaller into each side of the table with only 21 inches in each direction up the board, but then goes diagonal across from each of the 21-inch points into the table so they're touching. Basically creating a right triangle, I believe? Or no, it's not a right triangle. Isosceles? Triangles. Too many types to just remember off the top of my head. It's been too long since geometry class. God, that's so long ago. Anyway, I'm dating myself here. Deployment 4 is also similar but gives you a wider and shorter zone with the zones extending 15 inches into the board towards your opponent. And I guess we'll call that north-south. It's just, yeah. And 33 inches from your corner along the side you were on. And I guess that would be east-west. I should have thought of that at the beginning. Oh well. Anyway, the corners connect, giving each player a right triangle, and I got that right this time, to deploy into the table. The last deployment type is called Echelon Left, and well, this one is interesting. It's set up more in the familiar player edge format with the opposing deployment zones. From the player's perspective, to your left, your western side of the table in alignment to you, you have a deployment zone that extends 6 inches deep and 24 inches across in front of you towards your eastern side. At the midpoint, it shortens to 3 inches and continues to the right side of the table. Overall, I think the deployment zones are pretty cool and have a couple favorites in there just from looking at them. Now I want to look at the missions that we get in the deck, starting with the primaries. Mission 1 is Seize Dinju Heights. It has 2 objectives. For objective placement, it states, players place 1 objective in their opponent's table half, at least 6 inches away from any table edge, 18 inches from another objective, and at least 3 inches away from any terrain that is 1.5 inches or taller. It has a bonus objective called The Harder They Fall, which has you destroy your opponent's highest PV unit that is active at the start of the turn. If 2 or more units are tied, destroying any of those units achieves the scoring condition. This one is pretty straightforward, and I do like the bonus objective they have available here. Also, because the mission defines objective placement by table half, depending on which deployment the game uses, it can totally change the area that you have to deploy the objective, as well as the options and strategies that are available to you in capturing those. Mission 2 is Overrun Devil's Bath with 3 objectives. This one has a center of the board objective, and from each player's right has an objective placed 12 inches deep and 12 inches from each player's right, making a diagonal line across the table. Deployments 1 and 5 give players home objectives, and the other 3 make these centerline table objectives. It does have a bonus objective called New Mech Smell, which rewards you for destroying an enemy unit that was undamaged at the beginning of the turn. Mission 3 is Secure Robin's Crossing, and it also has 3 objectives. The first is in the center of the table. The other 2 are placed on each player's table edge, at least 6 inches away from their deployment zone or any other table edge. This does mean that in theory, you could place it very far into your corner on a corner deployment. That deployment setup for being far into your edge comes in here with the bonus objective of At All Costs, which requires you to control the objective in your opponent's table half. So that could be made, turned into a very hard thing to do. Mission 4 is Capture Scuba Heights, which says it has 3 objectives. Even though there are 4 displayed in the setup, and it's hard to explain the setup, best I can describe is 15 inches deep from each player's edge, 24 inches in, and on the sides 9 deep from the side, and 24 inches in. There is a twist though, as each player, beginning with the player who lost initiative, may pick 1 objective and move it up to 6 inches in any direction as long as it stays outside of a deployment zone. The bonus on this is Hold the Line, which essentially has you make sure no enemy units have crossed into your table half at the end of the turn and I assume that they have to survive having crossed that table half. Primary mission 4 is Assault Kozice Valley. I think I pronounced that correctly. That should be Polish. It has 4 objectives, and in each table half, each player would place an objective 12 inches away from any objective and 6 inches away from any table edge or deployment zone. On first reading, it was a tiny bit confusing, but makes sense, as each player would deploy 2 objectives, one on their half and one on their opponent's half. The bonus on this one is called Blocking Maneuver, and it gives you a bonus if you control both of the objectives that your opponent placed. So, once again, you're looking at controlling one on your side and one on your opponent's, but they have to be the ones your opponent placed. The last is called Clear Hulth Forest, and it has 5 objectives. These are placed in an interesting layout which has one in the center. On each player's right side, there is one 10 inches deep and 8 inches from the player's right, and one each player's left. There is one 15 inches deep and 15 inches from the side. This creates an interesting objective layout where 2 corners have objectives much farther from each player's left to right on opposing corners and closer in the opposite set of corners. I think this makes it interesting because it changes a lot of the tactics behind protecting home edge objectives. The bonus is actually pretty easy to achieve, as you have to either perform a physical attack or hit a target at long range, which I don't see as too hard to do in all fairness. Overall, the combinations of missions and deployment zones are interesting and give you a great deal of variety in how a game might be set up. I also think that the way they have done these is pretty cool as well, because in a casual setting you could roll 2d6, 1 for mission and 1 for deployment, with a 6 on deployment just being a reroll, or just roll a d5 if that even exists. Give me a second, let me look this up. Well, I'll be damned, they do. Or you can just roll a d10 and treat 6 to 10 as 1 to 5 again, I guess. Anyway, you could have random missions and deployments, making it where each game is different than the last. This only gets enhanced with the secondary missions. There are 9 secondary missions, and if you get 2 sets, and you do get 2 sets, presumably so one person's deck could be used for 2 players. They have blue and red tops to those cards, so you can quickly separate them. So let's look at these missions. You have 3 secondary mission types: Engage, Maneuver, and Action. In each game, you can have 2 secondaries. These secondaries cannot be the same type, though. The first ones are the Engage objectives. First among these is Headhunter, which gives you a bonus battle point for every opposing unit you destroy that costs 50 points or more. Or you get 1 battle point if a unit 50 points or more has lost half or more of its structure by the end of the game. Next up, we have Fly Swatter, which gives you a battle point for every unit you destroyed that costs 25 or less points, and this is also added up at the end of the game. The last Engage mission is Cherry Picker, and before the first turn, you pick 2 units from your opponent's force, and they pick 1 from their force. At the end of the game, each chosen unit gives you 2 battle points if it's destroyed, and 1 battle point if it has lost half or more of its structure. The next category is Maneuver, and this one is all about positioning. The first is Control Battle Space, which rewards you by either giving you 1 point for having units in 3 different table quarters and at least more than 6 inches from the center, or 2 points if you have units in all 4 quarters and at least more than 6 inches from the center. It doesn't count mounted units. Center position is pretty much the opposite, rewarding 1 point if you have 2 units fully inside of 6 inches at the center, or 2 points if you have 4 units in the center. Once again, not counting the mounted units. And the last one is in Maneuver is Overrun, which gives you 1 point for a unit in an opponent's deployment zone, 2 points for 2 units, and 3 points for 3 units. This doesn't include mounted units, of course. All three of these trigger at the end phase of a turn, and I think are pretty awesome because they can reward you for having a force which leans more into mobility to score points. The last category is action, and these involve interacting with the table or the enemy in a non-attacking way. First, we have intercept signals, which has you scan an objective which hasn't been scanned. If you succeed, you get 2 points. If the unit survives into the end phase, and 1 point if it's destroyed. Action mission number 2 is Spectrum Sweep. This one gives you a list of things that you can scan. This includes a table corner in the opponent's deployment zone, the highest point value surviving enemy unit, or the table center. If you scan one of these and survive, you get 2 points, and 1 if the unit doesn't survive. The last action last action card is Update TRO. This one has you scan an enemy unit that has not been successfully scanned. You get 2 points if you survive and 1 if you don't. Of course, I'm sure you're wondering, Carrie, you mentioned scanning like a lot here. How does this work? Well, there's a card included that explains it. After a unit moves, it can declare it will scan. It cannot scan an attack unless it has the Recon special ability, and cannot scan if it's sprinted. Also, a player, not a unit, may make 1 scan in a turn. So you can't have a Recon Lance essentially scan everything at once in a couple of those missions. Depending on equipment, some mechs and units are going to be better at scanning than others. The equipment that they have here and what they can do, from furthest to closest, Bloodhound BH Special lets you scan up to 13 inches away. PRB, or Probe, which usually is the Beagle Active Probe, or it's just the clans call it Active Probe. They don't like dogs, I don't know. Can scan up to 9 inches. Light Probe can scan up to 6 inches, and if you have none of these, you can only scan up to 3 inches. I guess sometimes size matters. Also, if the target or yourself is in an active ECM bubble that blocks the unit's ability at the end of the turn, it fails. This does make the Bloodhound Probe the king of scanning, though. Not only in distance, but also against ECM, as only Angel ECM, aka the AECM Special, can block it. As far as scoring, primary missions are scored at the end of each turn in the end phase, with the player gaining 1 point for each of the following. Controlling an objective, which is having more total size within 3 inches at the end of the turn. Control more objectives. Destroy at least 1 enemy unit. Destroy more enemy units in the turn, and achieve the mission bonus condition. With secondary missions, Engage is scored at the end of the game. Maneuver and Action each scored at the end phase of a turn, and can only be scored once per turn. They also have a rule for tabling your opponent, which is nice to see. Some rule sets do not include that. You score all points scored up to that point. You score all points for every turn remaining. You also score any secondaries that you could have had by turn 5. If a player concedes, they score 0 points. Getting into the tournament rules, they're pretty straightforward as far as special rules being used. It uses large units, special abilities, non-infantry unit cover, ECM and ECCM, towing, multiple attack rolls, and zipline drops. They are also using front-loaded initiative, which is always a good thing. Their force construction rules are faction and era locked by the player and are allowing up to 400 points for force construction. They have a skill cap of 6 with only 2 units allowed at that skill level and no lower end cap or limit. I think no lower end cap or limit is a bad idea. That is what did allow me to clean house in Tennessee at my first Alpha Strike tournament and bring their state championship belt back to Virginia, and coincidentally inspired the WolfNet format that plays like a skirmish game. But getting back to the subject, you can have 2 of any chassis and cannot duplicate variants for mechs. A force can only have a max of Jump Strong 2 and Artillery 2, with artillery units not being allowed below a skill of 4, and no units with BIM DRO, DCC, HPG, LAM, or RBT. Also no special abilities as far as special pilot abilities or formation abilities. We pretty much know the rest of the rules as far as the missions. I will say the two things which concern me in this format is the lack of a low skill limit, as with the right setup you can have a medium to low end heavy force delete a unit every turn, or more than one unit, through concentrated fire. And you also don't have a limit on the types of artillery. And I can tell you that in Alpha Strike the Long Tom is a terrifying piece of equipment, especially when not limited by being a battlefield support card and actually being a constant threat on the battlefield. In the team running this defense, I did talk to them about it, and they said that these rules, they have a lot of community input, and they haven't seen anybody do anything crazy like that. And to be fair, Michigan is far too far for me to drive to actually go make a point like I did in Tennessee. Other than these two things, I think the rules are pretty solid and look like a lot of fun, especially with the mission cards giving you a ton of variety in how you can build quick scenarios, especially for casual play. The tournament will be taking place on October 4th, and if I've done all of this right, you will be seeing this or listening to this a week before it happens. Unless you're a channel member or patron, in which case you'll be seeing this on like the 24th of September. Now, you are probably wondering how you can win a copy of this deck. Well, all you need to do is post a list that includes units, skill, and adjusted PV that conforms to the force building rules. The more broken, the better. And I will pick the list that I think is the most broken, and I will announce a winner at the end of October. There will be a link to our Discord with a specific section just for these lists. A link to the tournament rules will also be included in the video description. I want to thank everyone for listening and give a special thanks to Bill, who is running the event. I also want to thank my sponsor, FortressMiniaturesAndGames.com. If you need anything for BattleTech, you should really check them out. They have a wide variety of products, including the new Star League Battle Group and anything else you might need. And if you want to make sure that you get more content like this, remember to like and subscribe, and you can also support the channel and podcast by becoming a channel member or by supporting us on Patreon. Also, a quick note, looking at the rules for memberships, the more members we get, the more little features it lets me add on, especially when I figure out how to start doing some painting streams. Once again, I want to thank all of my patrons, all of my channel members. Without you, this would not be something I could do. And until next time, Mech Warriors, stay safe out there. This is Carrie, signing off. I want to thank all of our patrons, channel members, and our sponsor for supporting the channel. Our patrons, first we have Captain Sarah, then our lieutenants, Boy in a Box and Nathan. We then have our sergeants, BZ Archer, Faz, and Steven. Then our cadets, Dominic, NB Kaiju, Housemaster Poding, Jamie, and Scott. Then we have our wonderful channel member, Miss J. And finally, our sponsor and Mercenary Review and Bonding Commission Liaison, Fortress Miniatures and Games.